Well, welcome to my corner of the garage. Today's video is going to be a bit different, and as you can see here, I've got a new toy in the shop. In fact, it's my most expensive tool I've ever bought, and yes, I bought it with my own money. Monport is not sponsoring this video. They did not send this to me. They didn't ask for a review or anything, but I'm going to make a video kind of the unboxing and setting it up because I am a complete novice when it comes to lasers and engravers. Now this is a 45 watt CO2 laser. It's their 45 watt Pro, and I've got no idea what I'm doing. I haven't even downloaded LightBurn yet to my computer, so I figure for those out there that may be into woodworking and wanting to possibly look into getting a laser engraver, there's obviously a lot more expensive ones on the market. But this is the one that I could afford and seem to have the features that, again, I'm guessing that I'll need. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this thing unboxed and kind of walk you through the steps of getting it set up and hopefully using it sooner than later. The top's already kind of loose. Some of the brads already came undone in shipping, so hopefully everything's still in decent shape.
I figure I'd go ahead and mention now that the reason I got this machine specifically was because of the bed size, and most other lasers with this large of a bed were quite a bit more expensive. It's 300 millimeters by 400 millimeters, and that's roughly 12 inches by 16 inches, which is right around the size of most cutting boards or serving trays that I make, and I really wanted to be able to just drop it in and customize it. Now this red sliding bar on the front, you see that actually comes out and allows you to pass through a piece of material that is larger than the workbed. And so sometimes I will put a last name or a anniversary date on the end of a larger serving tray or cutting board, and so that will allow me to do so.
Now here's the other component I bought separately from the unit, and that's this water chiller. It's not the beefiest one, it's the 3000. Technically this one should be able to run fine without a water chiller. You just have to cycle water through here through a bucket. Comes with a little pump, but I just wanted to ensure that I'm going to be running this thing correctly. It's not going to overheat. It's going to be a little bit more legit from just a bucket of water, and I was able to get both of these units on a sale, and so I felt fine with spending a little over $100 to have a legitimate cooler for the laser tube. So I'm going to open this guy up now and see what other components and pieces are in here. Does not auto raise and lower and focus. You do have to rely on manually doing this, although it does have a fun little feature on this here that's kind of a magnetic assist that I'll go over in a little bit, which is how you set your height for your material, and it kind of auto focuses or semi-auto focuses. Okay, this looks like this is for the exhaust. Here's the water pump that I'm not going to end up needing. Looks like just one of those cheap fountain water pumps if I had to guess. But like I said, we'll be using the water cooler. Oh, nice. Got some protective glasses. Got some cables, USB to the computer, power, number of tools, set things up, little USB, oh that's kind of fun, 4 gig flash drive, instructions which I'll be utilizing to set this up, user's manual, although from what I think I looked at the PDF version online, it's really not that in-depth, so we'll see how much troubleshooting I'm doing versus actual reading of instructions and figuring out, winging it on my own or not. Oh, these are the little slats that go under the bed in place of the honeycomb I'm not sure if you can use them in addition to the honeycomb or not, but these go kind of vertically in the bed itself. From my limited knowledge of CO2 lasers, it does look like this is the air assist here, and I guess the laser is already everything, the laser head, let's see if I can get in focus here. It looks like everything's pre-installed. I was thinking kind of diode lasers, you have to install that, but I think this is already ready to go. This is where there's a mirror where from the laser tube in the back, it's going to shoot through a mirror there to the laser head itself. So I guess it's already pre-installed. I'll be interested to see if I have to do any calibrations. Looks like there's some manual tweaking, I guess, of the mirror. So I'll be interested to see how much out of the box this is just dead on, or if I have to do any calibration. There's already one issue, I think, that's already going to be a problem when I try to start this. I know there's this relay here which tells you if the cover is closed or not, and I'm figuring as a hard stop, or won't allow you to actually start the laser without it. The problem is when you shut the lid, when I push down on it, it's not actually pushing the recess yet. You can hear that click. That means that it's not engaging, and so I have a feeling that with this just in its resting position, that's not going to fire. All right, well, there's this little screw right here that I was able to loosen and physically push up this little actuator, and so now when I shut it, it engages. I don't know if you can hear the click or not. But anyway, that should work now, because in the instructions it definitely says if the lid is open, it will shut the laser off. So hopefully that means that will give me no problems now. Well, there's quite a lot to be desired from the instructions, the user's manual. For instance, it gives you, a lot of these steps for a maintenance schedule. Again, it looks like it was like Google translated, with a lot of the grammar and the spelling being wrong. So it's kind of what you'd find in like a typical Amazon package, the instructions. But also they give you these like really important steps of maintenance, like cleaning the lenses and cleaning the mirrors, and yet there are no actual instructions on how to remove any of the mirrors and lenses. It's just like it just mentions them in the manual, and then you just kind of have to figure it out on your own. So it definitely, like I said, there's a lot to be desired from the actual user's manual. Maybe there's some more documentation online, I haven't checked yet, but a lot of it is just kind of trial and error, figuring it out yourself. They do have instructions. There's a couple of kind of set screws right there to remove this whole housing, which has the focal lens in there. Again, no real steps other than loosen these two set screws and then this whole assembly drops out, but there's not really instructions on how to get the lens out and things like that. So anyway, there's going to be a lot of guessing and maybe some YouTubing and digging around on the internet to make sure. Like I said, I'm a beginner laser user, so hopefully I'm not going to screw anything up.
So this is where the laser's going to live. It's going to be in our home office / guest room, because I don't want it collecting dust out in the shop.
All right, so the current plan is that the laser is going to sit up here. Now this is pretty high for normal work use of a laser. I wouldn't recommend this. I am 6'6", so it'll be for most things accessible, except for maybe maintenance. It may be a little hard to get to the mirrors and lenses up that high, but loading in materials should be fine. My water cooler is going to go right here next to the machine, and obviously I'll use my Mac with LightBurn to control the laser. I bought this inline exhaust fan that I'm going to install obviously in between the laser, and then actually vent it out through this window, which I'll show in some later steps. And then went ahead and made sure to get the recommended CO2 fire extinguisher for the laser in case any kind of malfunction or fire starting. So I'll keep this accessible. So now it'll just be a matter of getting everything in here and installed and connected.
The depth of the laser was just a little bit deeper than the actual dresser itself. So I'm just attaching this 2x4 to the back, and then I'm going to put a little bit of a lip on it so that way the feet obviously don't slide off the back. It's not the prettiest thing in the world, but it's pretty much hidden once the dresser's pushed back against the wall and the laser's pretty much covering it up. And I'm putting these screws on either side just so that the feet won't rack left and right. Measuring the opening because I've got a PVC board that I'm going to use and cut down now to fit right in that opening.
Well, I had to trim off a little bit of the top and bottom of this vent because when I bought a 6-inch PVC board, I was thinking 6 inches, but should have known it was more like just under 5.5. But we are going to put that right around here. So now I've got to mark where the center point is. So that'll just go on the top right where the window closes on this. Make sure I've got a seal because there is a bit of a gap.
I really like this PVC board because I didn't have to paint and, well, prime and paint a board to seal it. This PVC is great because it's made out of PVC, looks like it's got kind of a faux wood grain on it, and it's actually great for, water is obviously going to be hitting this, and I don't have to worry about it rotting over time. I'm obviously installing the inline fan and then now the surge protector, marking out where those holes go so I can mount it on the back. And this is going to actually be what that fan and the water chiller are connected to, so I can just flip one switch and the exhaust fan and that industrial chiller kick on at the same time, independently from the laser.
And now I can set this in place. It's a pretty snug fit, just what I wanted. Guess we may need some of that foam on the bottom as well, because the back of this vent is actually hitting part of the window. Thought I'd accounted for all that. I think if I put one of these strips on the bottom, it should alleviate that. Yeah, let's go fix that. I think that should do it. Close that on there. And I think I am going to put a little silicone around the edges here, just to try and keep water out as much as possible.
These next steps will mostly be self-explanatory, but I'll walk you through them. I'm using a more rigid, this is dust hose from my shop leftover. It made this sharper turn easier than the other material that will go from the laser to the fan, which was less rigid. So then after I got that installed, could move the dresser back, and then I can get the water chiller in place. And this took nearly 3 gallons of distilled water. So just filling that up, keeping an eye on, that's got a gauge in the back, kind of water level. So just keeping an eye, make sure that's right where it needs to be. Can get this installed up because the hoses aren't quite long enough with as high as this laser is. So I employed my brother, younger brother, to come help me install it. So now I can install the in and out of the water lines to the back of the chiller. Then it's time to actually plug the machine into that same power strip. So again, I can't accidentally turn the laser on without the fan and the water chiller being on, so just kind of a safety measure. If you use the installed, or the included pump that comes with the laser, it actually, the power for that plugs directly into the laser. So when you power the laser up, that water pump kicks on automatically. I'm kind of essentially doing the same thing, but just adding a surge bar in line to everything. And now I can do the fun part of taking all that plastic wrap off. It's a little bit annoying because they put all the plastic on the acrylic before they tightened all the screws down. So I'm ripping the majority of it off, and then we'll have to come back with an Allen key to loosen each screw and get the leftover plastic off that was left behind.
All right, time to fire everything up. When I turn the power strip on, fan automatically comes on. This will be my first time turning on the cooler, the chiller. So that technically should start pumping water through the tube when I turn this on. Pretty cool. All right, this is my first time firing up the machine. The instructions were very poor, so it's kind of hard to know exactly what the right steps are, because it says switch it on, then turn the knob, then switch it on again. So I don't know what that means. So I'm going to pull this knob and then turn it on. Whoa, there it is. Sweet. It's more exciting than I thought it would be. So apparently it's supposed to go to home, whatever that means. Origin. Interesting. Wonder why it's picking that as home. Well, let's get this connected to the computer and get it talking with LightBurn. All right, now that LightBurn is installed on my computer, it's time for me to officially connect it for the first time. All right, it's plugged in. Let's see if it recognizes the device.
This was literally probably one of the easiest parts of the whole unboxing, getting it set up, anything. It automatically recognized the Monport laser. LightBurn, I've got to say, having used it for a little over a month now, it is just super intuitive. There's plenty of resources online for getting into some of the extras, but just right off the bat, it was super easy to connect this laser, to set up the parameters and get it communicating. And so I was just overly pleased with how straightforward things were. Here I'm playing around a little bit with my logo. I'm going to try a couple of processes. I'm looking up some of the kind of recommended settings for cutting and engraving from Monport's website before I actually give it a go.
Well, for one, I forgot to set my depth, so forgot to set my table, so I definitely do not have the right focus. Let's try that again. Alright, let's do this the right way now. I'm going to flip this around.
Some of the more expensive machines out there have autofocus, but even some of the really pricey ones, some of the ones my friends have that are larger, you have to manually do this. But what I really do is like that little magnetic stop that pops up when it's in focus, basically just a set depth. That has actually been really handy, but again, there have been a few more times that I've forgotten to do this step and had to start the job over again.
That went much better using the auto or the semi-auto focus. So here's the back of it. None of them like really went completely through, so I think I'm going to change some of my parameters. Some of these, if you push on them, they do want to come out, but it didn't quite break all the fibers in that veneer of the plywood. So I think I want to run this again for actually cutting out materials. I'm going to want to change my speed and power, but for my very first test run, that was very simple and went really well. That's pretty cool. That is pretty sweet. Well, I've completed my first ever project with the laser from start to finish. The backstory on this is a Father's Day gift for my dad. It's actually belated now because the laser came, I think 6 to 7 weeks took to get here, which was later than I expected. So anyway, I made this for my dad, who was in the Air Force. His dad was in the Air Force. My granddad actually trained pilots on the B-25, and so this plane kind of has some, special significance to our family. And I made a walnut frame out of actually a walnut tree that I chopped up and milled up. So it's a little more figured than usual for furniture, but it kind of makes it a really pretty frame. And so anyway, I'm going to go gift this to my dad. I did customize it on the back with my brand and then put Happy Father's Day 2025. So far I'm really happy with the laser. I'll give a little bit more of the review at the end, but I'm going to go deliver this right now to Dad, and I think he's going to really like it.
Here are a few of the other projects that I've made so far, both engraving and cutting out material. That first one was pecan, this is plywood, and then here I've done both 6mm and 9mm of acrylic, and I've got some custom pieces coming up. These are former ones that I actually had taken to a friend to use his big CO2 laser, but I've got some more custom, nice pieces, high-end cutting boards and serving trays and stuff that I'm going to be making in the near future, and I want to be able to utilize my engraver to customize those for the folks that purchase them.
All right, well, if you are seriously considering getting this laser still, please pay attention to this next part, as I want to go over some very specific pros and cons that I've run into in setting up this machine and utilizing it, and so hopefully this is nice and informative. So to start out with, a lot's happened since the last take on this video, and so I want to catch you up to speed. After I share a few of my pros, I'm going to get into some of the cons. And I've got my computer here just to make sure I cover everything I want to. So starting out with some of the pros of things I found. Semi-autofocus, I'm a big fan of. Did not want to spend the money for autofocus on the auto-raising beds like some lasers have. I also appreciate this over the use of a plexiglass measuring piece that some of the industrial CO2 lasers need. Having that magnetic little stop has been super helpful when I remember to do it. There's times that I forget, and that's on me. But I like that feature. It's pretty powerful and fast. So again, for an entry level and maybe even mid-level, this has been plenty of power for what I've needed it for, as far as cutting plywood, plexiglass, up to 9mm. And so for me, love the power, love the speed. 600 millimeters a second has been really nice to knock out some full-size projects. You're gonna have to wait a bit depending on how much you're engraving, but it's a nice and fast machine. It's well lit. I really like the lighting system. The red laser dot for kind of pinpointing where the laser is going to cut is pretty accurate right out of the box. I did find out how to more fine-tune that, but it involves getting in through the back, and there's some set screws behind. I'd have to disassemble part of it, probably move it out from the wall, and so I don't want to mess with that. It's close enough that it works for my needs. It's very easy to connect to LightBurn. I'm not sure if that's more a pro of the LightBurn software, but this machine connected right up to it. here's my segue into from the pros kind of and cons. Pro is customer support was really quick at getting back with me when I had some issues. So I've heard in the past that sometimes they're just non-responsive. I didn't have that experience, but let me kind of share with you some of the recent developments to start my cons list off. So other than this sensor right out of the box not being fully engaged and having to find that on my own and then kind of figure out how to get that adjusted, the other thing right out of the box that was not dead on was the optical path. And I'm kind of embarrassed that it took me as long as it did to figure out and pinpoint exactly what was going on. I banged my head against the wall a lot in the form of changing settings because I could just never get consistent cuts. So I should have probably known and not assumed that everything was cutting perfectly fine. But basically the whole right side of my work bed was not cutting consistently. And after some correspondence with Monport, basically they said, yeah, it sounds like your optical path has an issue. And so they did send me an email with some video links. I will say they were not very professional videos. They didn't have any verbal instructions. There were a couple of subtitles at the bottom with a lot of gesturing, but it was pretty vague and kind of I had to infer and extrapolate a lot from those tutorial or instructional videos. I was able to get the optical path kind of aligned and focused so that now I have consistent cutting across the whole work table. Basically what happened was it was out of focus. This really the secondary mirror was not focused perfectly, and so by the time it was further away from the original laser lens, it was spreading too much of that light, and I was just getting a wider laser beam. It was burning the material, not cutting all the way through. And so I went through, wasted a lot of materials because I would run a test cut and everything would be fine. And then I would run the full scale piece and I would not get complete cutting across the whole work table. And so that was a big frustration of mine. And in hindsight, I should have caught on earlier. I should have reached out sooner. But it's fixed now, and it did take, like I said, not too much time, but you do have to strip this down a bit, take some of these parts off. You have to get in there with some tools, and it was kind of fun. It's kind of like sighting a scope on a rifle, but also you kind of had to know what you were doing. So keep that in mind. You may have some tweaking you have to do right out of the box as far as the optical path if you're like me. I don't know if that was because of shipping and handling, it came from overseas and got bumped and rattled, or if it just was not set up well, in the factory. But anyway, that was my experience there. Another con is the honeycomb table that slides around. It would be nice if it had some referencing, so that way as you're putting new sheets in, if you're doing repeated cuts, it had something to reference off of, but it just kind of slides around in there. I might fix that again, just fabricating something to keep it in place so that my repeating jobs, I can just slide that in and out without it moving around. The DSP controller, not intuitive at all. Luckily, I don't really have to use it. Had to use it a little bit for the calibration and messing with the optical path, but I have not tried to run a file from it off a USB because it is not intuitive and there's no documentation in the user's manual or anything. So just know it's complicated and you're on your own to figure it out. So luckily LightBurn does everything I need to as far as communicating with the device. I'm hoping I don't have to change a bunch of settings in the future because again, right out of the box, how it communicates with LightBurn works just fine, but again, as a whole, the DSP controller just seems kind of far out there and there's no help for that in documentation form. I will say that some of the specs online for this machine specifically were a little bit off, so don't take those as just hard and fast truth. You'll probably have to play around with your own settings. I found sometimes their power settings were a little bit low or their speed was a little too high. So don't go just off the documentation. You'll have to really dial in this machine yourself and figure out with your material what exactly it needs to, the settings it needs to cut and engrave. As far as in general, first time laser, user, if you're kind of in the same boat trying to figure out if you want to get into buying a laser, either diode or CO2, is just keep in mind the stink factor. Because you're cutting material, you're burning through stuff or you're burning on top of stuff, you are going to get some just residual smell, even if you have great fume extraction. I've been super pleased with how powerful an extractor I've got, both between the built-in fan and my inline duct fan. That moves a ton of air. You can feel it when the lid's closed, any of the gaps for airflow. It's really sucking a lot of air. But because you're burning stuff in this room, you're going to smell it after the fact to a degree. Now, this is our guest room, so that's a little bit of an annoyance, but I definitely did not want to stick this in my garage shop where I'm making tons of sawdust, because there's a lot of moving parts. It's electronics. I need a computer to go with it. So that was pretty much out of the question. I did buy some of these odor eliminating beads, and I've put an air purifier in the room, which has helped somewhat. But just know, depending on where you set it, you're going to get a little bit of smell. Now, luckily, my wife doesn't just absolutely hate it. She kind of says it smells like a distant campfire. One friend compared it to kind of like a faint pipe smoke tobacco smell. But again, I'm hoping it's not going to just really reek in this room after years of use. But do keep that in mind. You're going to get residual smell no matter what. Let's talk about the specifics of a CO2 laser. Again, I'm new to this. I've never owned a diode laser, but let me tell you a little bit of the cons of a CO2 laser in general. The power aspect is great. The fact that you can cut through clear acrylic is great. So again, those are two things I wanted. The couple of annoyances is you've got to have a separate cooling, something for your laser. So I've got a water chiller. You just use a bucket of water with a pump that comes with it, but you've got to have something separate for cooling. And then the second thing is you've got a laser tube on here with a certain lifespan. And the other downside with that is, even though this is a 45 watt laser, I regularly cannot use it to its full power. They do not recommend running CO2 lasers at 100% power for extended periods of time. I try not to use mine for any time at all above 70%. So 70% of 45 watts is like somewhere around 31% or 31 watts. So really it's almost more like a 31 watt laser in the sense of that's the power I can get out of it. And they say that, I think it's on their website, 50 to 70% power will allow this tube to have a lifespan of 1,500 to 2,000 hours. And then after that, you've kind of used its life up. And so that's something to consider, because I don't even know if Monport that I've found sells this exact laser tube as a replacement. I think I'd have to drop down to 40 watts. They do have some higher powered ones, but I don't know if they would work in this machine as far as size. And so that's something to consider. I kind of knew of that laser tubes did have a lifespan. I wasn't really sure of numbers until I got digging into what this one would be. But just know the higher power you use, the shorter the lifespan of that laser is. So hopefully these were helpful considerations if you're thinking about getting a laser, a CO2 laser specifically, and if you're considering the Monport Reno45 Pro. Like I said, overall, very pleased with it. I'm not regretting the purchase, but I just want you to be informed in case this is something that you're interested in. If you've got a different laser, either diode, CO2, different brand, and you've got some feedback you'd like to share, I'm all ears, because I may get another machine one of these days to use it for dual purposes or different purposes, or once this guy dies. So I'd love to hear some feedback from you if you've got any. But thanks so much for sticking with me to the end of this video, and I'll catch you on the next one.